Hello and welcome to today's grand incident. Puzzle games are a genre that is very, varied. There's a number of them I can recall playing that I still enjoy to this day, and others that just didn't do anything for me at all. In that latter category, when I was little, my mom bought me a game called Super Bust-A-Move for the Game Boy Advance. I'm pretty sure the reason I gave the game any real chance was because I recognized a few characters in it. The little dragons, Bub and Bob, were the protagonists of Bobble, a game we owned on PlayStation that my older brother and I used to play with our mom all the time. You're probably wondering what this has to do with today's game. Well, by some twist of fate, that same gameplay style I had once dismissed long ago returned in the form of a Touhou fan game, and this time with some additional, more musical elements. That's what I wanted to talk about today. Touhou's competitive puzzler with some rhythm-based gameplay at its core. The game known as Touhou Spell Bubble. The game was released for Nintendo Switch on February 6, 2020, and later translated for English on October 29, 2020 by Taito Corporation, and is a tile-matching puzzle game featuring 20 different characters from the Touhou series. Fun fact, Touhou series creator, Zun, had worked for Taito from 1998 to 2007, so it's cool to see Taito end up making a game using Zun's very own IP. The main gameplay is the same as another puzzle game released by Taito in 1984, known as Puzzle Bobble in Japan and Bust-A-Move in North America and Europe. The game has a few modes, but I'll start with the main campaign. The story here is that Kirisami Marisa, alongside the other magicians, Patchouli Knowledge and Alice Murgatroyd, have developed a new game that is taking Gensokyo by storm. Marisa invites Reimu to play, and Reimu agrees. Sort of. She's mostly going around trying to confirm ulterior motives from all the participating parties. Marisa explains the rules, but I'll be taking her job here. The goal of the game is to pop bubbles by shooting matching colors to create combos. The game has three main colors, red, blue, and yellow, and your shooter cycles between them. You can also swap between your current color and the one in reserve. Your playfield will drop a row every 3 shots, and you can manually call down more if you want. Getting big combos causes beat mode, where you press the button at the right time for increased offense against your opponent. This is where the rhythm game comes in. All matches are played to a song, and the speed and length of the selected song determines the same for the match. Combo beats can happen in intervals of 2 to 9, and are dependent on where in the song you are at the time of activation. You can see this on the side of your playfield. There are 41 different tracks in the game to play, and DLC packs for more. But I'm getting off topic. Back to the game. Scoring combos will send blank bubbles over to your opponent after their next move. The reason it's their next move is because when you send bubbles, any blanks you would send back are subtracted from the oncoming amount. These bubbles change color to whatever color you shoot them with, but a clutter of them hinders combos. In order to score, you need to pop bubbles yourself, or run your opponent's playfield past the line to claim their field as points. The best way to do this is by filling your gauge located around your launcher. This is known as the Awakening gauge. Awakening mode gives you a special playfield that you can use to score large beat chains to send lots of blanks. When your field is forced over the line, it will activate counterattack mode. This field gives you an opportunity to rack up combos, so you aren't starting on a fresh board with a bunch of blank bubbles already waiting for you. That covers the basics. Now let's talk about the character specialties. Every character has 3 different spell cards they can use, but can only bring 1 per match. Spell cards are easier to remember as a character's special attacks. There are 2 types of spell cards. Blue outline cards are supportive. They affect the user, mostly by changing bubbles to certain colors, or increasing the amount of blank bubbles that you send. Red outline cards are offensive. They affect your opponent's playfield. These cards have way more variety in their effects than blue ones, but the most common of them is changing bubbles to a 4th or 5th color in green and purple. The last thing to mention about spell cards is that you can't use a red card on an opponent in Awakening or counterattack mode. And no spell card can be used while the player is in beat mode. As casting doesn't pause the song, the cut-in would completely disrupt the rhythm. Back to the campaign, you go around playing matches against all the other characters in the game. Each character has their own theme, and aside from spell cards, all have passive abilities. Reimu, for example, has a more lenient window on hitting a perfect beat. Other characters have abilities that cause unique bubbles to drop on your opponent's field. An example here is Chirno, who occasionally drops freeze bubbles that when hit, freeze the surrounding area for 3 shots. The game also uses these matches to slowly introduce the special bubbles that can show up. These special bubbles either cause color changes, or clear certain areas of the board. Defeating each character will unlock them for use in verses, and that's about everything. The story is pretty fun. A silly idea for sure, but the character writing is actually very good. It's way better than I had expected, that's for sure. And surprise, it doesn't end after Reimu. Finishing Reimu's story unlocks the Marisa arc. Marisa's story is the events of the game from her point of view, starting with the creation of Spell Bubble. This campaign is, as indicated by the big lunatic at the top of the screen, difficult. Every character in the game has a cheat version of one of their spell cards, and some matches have extra conditions applied to them. An example here is Remilia using Vampirish Night. The actual card sends 5 bats to your opponent's field. In Marissa's story, she sends you 100 bats. The last 5 matches of this campaign are ridiculous, especially the final one. It's gonna take more than a few attempts to beat it. Well, if you manage to clear it, congrats. That's all the story currently available. Now that the campaigns are done, let's talk about the other modes. Side stories are what I assume to be mini-campaigns for other characters. I say assume because at the time of this writing, there are no side stories available in English. After that is Versus Mode. Here you can play against a CPU of whatever difficulty to any song you want. You can adjust the rules to limit special bubbles and spell cards, or apply a handicap. Battle Mode is the same, but for 2 human players instead. Challenge Mode is a bunch of missions that pre-select your character and music that you have to clear. Each challenge is ranked by a difficulty of 1 to 10, and features different tracks not used in the campaign. Most of these are fine, but the level 10 missions are just ridiculous, especially the last one. The objective is, defeat Marissa in a fair fight, but that is a flat-out lie. Your playfield is littered with blank bubbles through the whole match, and since you're supposed to start with the same setup as your opponent, you simply miss out on combos by cutoffs, making the first 15 seconds ridiculously difficult to get through without getting downed. Not only that, you aren't given any special bubbles to work with at all, while Marissa is playing with a completely normal board, on top of being on the highest AI level. It's the kind of difficulty you'd expect out of older games. They kept you playing by being very hard to beat. I'm pretty sure I understand why they went this direction with the single player content, but that doesn't mean I'm a fan of it. Well, now that the gameplay modes are finished, let's check out the extras. First there's Corriendo. Here you use coins that are earned by winning matches to buy the remaining songs not present in the campaign, as well as the other characters' spell cards. All that's left after that is the gallery, where you can look at the character artwork and listen to the game's soundtrack. That covers everything so far. As the game is still quite new, there's still updates and additional DLC happening for it. There's a news tab on top of the menu that you can use to keep up, provided you get the translated version sometime after the actual updates. Touhou Spell Bubble is a very fun game. The main gameplay is simple and easy to understand, but there's a surprising amount of depth to it with its variety of characters and abilities. My favorite part is how much of it is momentum based. If both sides are playing well, it doesn't look like much is happening, but if you give up a chain with a bad shot or two, you can find yourself in an unrecoverable situation almost instantly. As I mentioned earlier, there's 41 tracks available in the game, all of which are songs from popular fan groups that are mixes of Touhou music. There's a lot of groups involved, so I won't bother listing them all here, but with how much variety there is, it's very likely you'll find a few that you absolutely love, or maybe have even heard before. All the character art is done by different artists as well, my favorite being Yukari Yakumo, who was done by Banpai Akira, aka Vampire Killer, the same Vampire Killer who had done the art for Touhouvania almost 11 years ago. Every character is voiced too. Characters seem to have special pre-match banter depending on who they're facing. Not sure what they're saying exactly, but I can pick out a few words every now and again. Really, the visual presentation of the game is top-notch. The gameplay is fun, the story is refreshingly well written, and the music is a ton of amazing tracks. Now, the not-so-nice part. The absolute biggest issue Spell Bubble faces is the inability to play with others outside of local play. I know that the rhythm system won't be perfect in an online format, but unless you know someone locally to play against, you'll only be able to fight CPUs after you finish the single-player stuff. This is very important because this is a full-price game, with DLC that is not free. Spell Bubble is the kind of game that you get the bulk of your playtime from Versus, but again, if you can't do that locally, then you're out of luck. This is also why I think the single-player content has some of those unreasonably challenging matches. I don't like using the price of a game as a negative, but it's a very hard thing to ignore when you look at how much you'll be spending compared to how much you'll be playing. Spell Bubble is also only available on Nintendo Switch. I don't know if there are plans for other systems, but with there currently being no online option, this wouldn't do a whole lot for it. On a smaller scale, the load times for the game could be better. I'm willing to accept that they're not that bad, but when you're constantly restarting the hard content, you start to get a little impatient with them. While I said the writing for the characters were great, the story is littered with spelling errors. These don't exactly ruin the game, and some of the errors made for some silly names, like Pacholti and Ramilla. But my issue is that I've seen more polished English translations of other fan games, and Taito Corporation isn't exactly some small-time developer, so there's no excuse for the amount of errors here. I would love to be able to say that the positives outweigh the negatives, but the most glaring flaw here is just too much to ignore. I'm glad I have people I can play with, and I really hope at least some kind of online play is implemented in the future, as the game would only benefit from its inclusion. Regarding the developer, Taito Corporation, they are still active to this day. I mean, of course they are. This is a big-name developer from the early days of video games. I have nothing else to add here, so I'm moving on to the rating. Touhou Spell Bubble is a mixed bag, but I'm leaning more so on it being a rank Aya of a game. Let me explain why. This one is really weird, and I took some time trying to decide, as the game has elements of the other ranks. Characters are well written, and their personalities really shine in the story. The variety of spell cards and passive abilities are also great introductions to a character's strengths. While Touhou characters don't actually have official voices, I find the ones given in Spell Bubble are very close to what I would assume them to have based on their personalities. All of these elements would lead me to call this a ranked Cheerno, but the main element of the gameplay is what's got me conflicted. All the music in the game are fan mixes of Touhou songs, so while it is Touhou, it's all from fan groups. There are some very popular tracks included in this game, some of which you may have heard before even if you know nothing about Touhou. But given the negatives of the game I mentioned earlier, it seems really difficult to sell someone on this game if they don't know or even care about most of, if not all of the music, available in the game. The music is a selling point, and it's related to Touhou, but it's the kind of extra knowledge I would amount to an AQ rating. In fact, if it wasn't for the incredibly popular classics like Bad Apple and Cheerno's Perfect Math class being included in the lineup, I would have called it an AQ. It's that mix of additional knowledge with slight familiarity even to a casual that leaves me in the middle, with a rating of Aya. Would you agree or disagree? Let me know what you think. Touhou Spell Bubble is a very addictive puzzle game that's easy to learn but difficult to master. It has a fantastic selection of music, great variety of abilities to spice up the gameplay, and beautiful visuals. I didn't think you could combine two genres such as puzzle and rhythm together in this way and have it work as well as it does. If you're familiar with the groups included in the musical lineup, and have a way to play against another human, then I would recommend it. If you're unable to do so, then hold out hope that maybe in the future, we get some sort of online play implemented. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you during the next incident.